911, what's your emergency?
Oh God, he just beheaded one!
What's happening, ma'am? Can you explain calmly?
It's insane. There's so much blood.
Please slow down, ma'am. What's happening?
This guy is in a toy store at Town and Country, is attacking mannequins.
Mannequins?
Yeah, those life-size superhero things. These decorations.
Are there any injuries?
Just the attacker, I think. He's swinging like a wild animal. His blood is everywhere, from his hands, his face. It's like a horror flick. He just ripped off Fat Man's head.
Stay calm. Get yourself to safety. Help is on the way.
Oh no, he's coming this way!
Ma'am, please stay on the line.
Harassing mannequins. You'd think, after all the blood, the screams, the desperate pleas for help, you'd be immune to the absurd. But here I was, staring at the red light on my ambulance, the dispatcher's voice crackling a play-by-play of some maniac throttling plastic people in a toy store. Made you wonder what qualified as an emergency sometimes. Maybe saving lives just wasn't as glamorous as the movies made it out to be. Mannequins? Christ, you telling me dispatch scraped the bottom of the barrel again? We're not miracle workers, you know. CPR on a shop dummy? Pretty sure a lint roller's all they need. And, of course, they paired me up with Richard Clark. Man, did I hate that jerk. We stashed the ambulance on a side street, well clear of the human stampede gushing out of the incident zone, like ants from a kicked anthill. Parking any closer felt suicidal. Who knew when the panicked herd would decide to trample anything in their path, even flashing lights and sirens. Outside the area, a gaggle of cops milled about, their crisp uniforms a stark contrast to the chaos. They scribbled in notebooks, barked into radios, but their movements lacked the urgency the scene demanded. A chuckle escaped my throat. If even the cops were this clueless, what were we walking into? This mannequin mauler must be a seriously dissatisfied customer. Steeling myself for the worst, I grabbed my backpack and joined the fray, a knot of unease tightening in my gut. Town and Country Village, an open-air haven in the heart of Houston, was usually a picture of leisurely strolls and cheerful chatter. Sunlight dappled through the leaves of mature trees, casting cool shade on the cobblestone walkways. Vibrant cafes spilled out onto the street, their yellow umbrellas adding a splash of color against the backdrop of quaint shops and bustling markets. But today the air crackled with a different kind of energy. The usual midday symphony of clinking coffee cups, chattering shoppers, and the rhythmic drone of street performers had been replaced by a cacophony of unease. People ambled or rushed past, their faces etched with a mix of morbid curiosity and genuine concern. The normally cheerful murmurs had morphed into a disjointed chorus of hushed gasps, frantic whispers, and the occasional shrill cry that made my heart race with unease. Navigating the shifty crowd felt like wading through a sea of disquiet, the tension thick enough to cut with a butter knife. Finally, through the throng, a cluster of people huddled before the entrance to the toy store, the epicenter of this unexpected midday drama. "Stay back, I mean it." The desperate plea echoed through the throng, emanating from the epicenter of the crowd. A man with wide, manic eyes spun erratically. In one hand, he clutched a torn Spider-Man arm, its bright red paint stark against the pallor of his knuckles. His other hand grasped a plastic lightsaber, its childish glow highlighting the cuts and bruises across his palms and face. He wasn't directly threatening the onlookers, but his erratic behavior, coupled with the sight of all the blood, kept them at bay, forming a loose ring around him. "Paul, listen to me," someone called out from the front, their voice laced with concern and a hint of familiarity. "It's okay. Just put the things down, all right? No one's spying on you." Unlike the panicked individuals fleeing the store, this particular group seemed strangely calm, almost familiar with the man at the center of the chaos. Perhaps that's why the police, hovering at the periphery, hadn't intervened yet. The space around the toy store was choked with onlookers, making their approach difficult, and the crowd itself, bizarrely, seemed to be acting as a barrier. A knot of unease tightened in my gut as we inched closer. The situation was absurd. A deranged man wielding plastic weapons, a hesitant crowd, and clueless cops. Yet his body drenched in blood sent a jolt of concern through me. This wasn't just some bizarre outburst. Something was genuinely wrong. "He's back at it again, isn't he?" The gruff voice startled me as I navigated the press of bodies. It wasn't directed at anyone in particular, but it seemed to float directly towards me. I turned to find myself face to face with a short, wiry man. Despite the chaotic scene around him, his stance was relaxed, almost casual. A wispy gray beard framed his weathered face, and his eyes twinkled with a hint of amusement, almost as if he were enjoying the spectacle. It was clear he was addressing me with his comment, and I couldn't help but raise an eyebrow in response. "Paul's all right," the man chuckled, leaning against the throng of onlookers, his voice raspy yet oddly comforting. "Been performing here for almost a year now, ever since the incident." My curiosity piqued. I paused, letting the crowd shuffle me back a step. "Incident?" I asked, catching Richard's worried glance as he tried to approach Paul. "Ever watch those talent show meltdowns?" the man snorted, a glint of amusement in his eye. "Paul? Well, he had a moment." He then proceeded to describe Paul, the mannequin guy at the center of the chaos. Turns out Paul had tried his hand at a talent show, aiming to be a multiple hero. My eyebrows shot up. "Multiple hero," I echoed, trying to decipher the term. "Yeah, like a mashup," the man explained, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Spider-Man with a cape, Batman with webs. Said it was a reflection of society's need for complex heroes. Jury's still out on whether it was a brilliant idea or a symptom of something else, but it didn't go well for him." A sigh escaped his lips. "Ever since then, this place has become his testing ground for his character. And the folks here, well, they've grown fond of him. Hence the cops being held at bay." My gaze flickered to the man at the front, the one who'd spoken to Paul. He mentioned something about no one spying. "Oh, that," the man chuckled, shaking his head. "Paul believes that the world is so enamored with his character that villains might be lurking among the mannequins, disguised and spying on him. You see, that toy store has a whole superhero section, and, well, that just triggered him. He thinks they're out to copy his superpowers, maybe even use them recklessly or for malicious purposes against the world." The old guy's spiel calmed me down a notch. Sure, the whole thing was still a clown show, a grown man throwing a tantrum with plastic toys, but at least it wasn't a complete circus. Knowing Paul's backstory, his performance art, gave the whole mess a context the initial chaos lacked. It also hinted that pepper spray might not be the best first move. But logic could not ignore the obvious. Paul's hands and face weren't just stained. The crimson hue wasn't from makeup, but from blood. Not the kind of color scheme you'd expect from a rejected superhero. More like a scene straight out of a horror movie. A familiar zing, zit of the toy lightsaber pierced the tense air, followed immediately by a surprised yelp that couldn't be mistaken for anything else but Richard. "Ow! Ow! Ow!" he yelped, hopping on one foot and cradling his hand. Apparently, my overly enthusiastic partner had decided to test the mettle of our superhero with his bare hand, a tactic that earned him a painful tap from the plastic blade. It was the highlight of my week. Did I already mention what I think about Richard? Shoving my way through the hesitant crowd, I muttered under my breath, "Medic, not a cop, folks. Just trying to help." My words seemed to have little effect on the human barricade, but persistent nudging eventually landed me at the front. The scene that greeted me was a bizarre tableau. Paul, still brandishing the plastic lightsaber like a deranged traffic cop, held the plastic Spider-Man arm in his other hand, a silent testament to the earlier destruction. "I warned you to back off. Does anyone else dare test my might?" His words echoed in the tense silence, broken only by the occasional cough or muttered comment from the crowd. I couldn't help but chuckle under my breath. Paul, despite his menacing pronouncements, was a walking contradiction. A man in his mid-40s, he was built more like a beanpole than a superhero. His lanky frame, hunched back, and exaggerated movements made him seem more like a cartoon villain trying out for a community theater production than a genuine threat. Deciding to play along, at least initially, I decided to try the calming approach everyone else seemed so keen on. Maybe it was the cynic in me, but I figured blending in wouldn't hurt, especially with this audience. So I took a deep breath, plastered on my most concerned expression, and stepped forward, hoping for the best and preparing for the worst. Long story short, it didn't work. The shrill voice of the toy store owner pierced through the tension, directed like a dart at the officers who were finally making headway through the hesitant crowd. "Why aren't you arresting him? Look at the mess he's made of my store." Her flushed face, contorted with anger, mirrored the chaos of her ruined day. Arrest seemed imminent now, and while the sight of Paul's mounting panic tugged at my conscience, a plan, admittedly absurd, began to form. I signaled Clark to the ambulance. "Jump behind the wheel and drive as close to the crowd as possible. I'll do the rest." With adrenaline pumping, I positioned myself at the open side door, ready to make my move. As we approached, I shouted out, Paul, is that you?" The figure at the center of the chaos turned towards me, and I could see the flicker of recognition in his eyes. "Your getaway car is ready," I shouted. "Hop in. We'll take you to headquarters." To my surprise, Paul wasted no time. With a burst of energy, he sprinted towards the ambulance and leapt inside, a grin spreading across his face. The crowd sighed in unison, offering a mix of bewildered amusement and relief. The officers, however, stood dumbfounded, unsure of how to react. In the ambulance, I urged Paul to buckle up for a quick getaway. As he settled in beside me, his face lit up with excitement. "Where are we off to now?" he asked eagerly. The deadpan voice of the driver, Richard, who wasn't exactly thrilled about his bandaged fingers, cut through the air. "Morgue." I quickly dismissed Richard's harsh words, reassuring Paul that we'd heal his wounds and refill his webs before heading to the headquarters, a place to rest and recuperate before continuing our adventure. After all, in moments of chaos, a little creativity goes a long way. I tended to his injuries, the result of a skirmish with those stubborn plastic statues. Despite the chaotic scene, his wounds weren't as severe as I initially feared. In the ambulance, I categorized each item I used to tend to his wounds as a supernatural antidote in our improvised game. However, my primary concern lay with his mental well-being, and it was clear that a trip to the hospital was unavoidable. To ease his apprehension, I concocted a tale about my clandestine allies, who I assured him were eager to assist in uncovering the identity of those seeking to exploit his superpowers. Surprisingly, he accepted it without question. With a sense of relief, I entrusted him into the capable hands of my colleagues, though I couldn't entirely dismiss the possibility of involving the authorities. Stepping out of the hospital, I found Clark, gesturing towards me as he spoke to two officers. "Yeah, he's the brains behind it," he declared, leaving the unspoken question hanging in the air. Brains behind what, exactly? I asked, already dreading the answer. A wry smile spread across the officer's face. You're getting a ticket for orchestrating a getaway. Ah, the joys of having a partner who's always got your back. Classic Richard Clark. Just what I needed. The day's events left a bitter taste in my mouth, a cocktail of absurdity, frustration, and a hint of unexpected kindness. As I walked away, the image of Paul, still clinging to his delusional persona, flickered in my mind. A stark reminder of the complexities and bizarre situations that life can throw at you. And the fine, I never got it.